All right, let's jump right into this. Welcome to today's explainer, where we are going on a totally fascinating journey into the very origins of our own species. We're going to be pulling some brilliant insights from Yuval Noah Harari's book, Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind. We are going to unpack the actual secrets of our past and make sense of what is, quite frankly, a massive, sprawling history. And it really all boils down to this one core question. How exactly did an insignificant ape sitting squarely in the middle of the food chain become the undisputed ruler of planet Earth? It's a huge historical mystery. But by the end of this explainer, I promise you, we are going to have a completely mind-bending answer for you. To get a little perspective on this, let's zoom way, way out. This timeline really puts things in place and shows just how newly arrived we actually are. 13.5 billion years ago, the Big Bang kicks off physics. 3.8 billion years ago, biology begins with the first organisms. And it isn't until 2.5 million years ago that the genus Homo, humans, evolves over in Africa. But the cognitive revolution, the actual spark of human history as we know it, that happened just 70,000 years ago, literally a blink of an eye in cosmic time. Just to ground us for a second, consider this human handprint. It was made about 30,000 years ago on a cave wall in southern France. It's so deeply personal, right? It's just somebody reaching out across thousands of millennia, essentially trying to say, hey, I was here. It's a wild contrast when you put our modern, absolute global dominance right next to our incredibly humble, vulnerable beginnings. Okay, part one, animals of no significance. In the middle, we really need to shatter our collective ego a bit right here. Because for millions of years, prehistoric humans had no more impact on their environment than, say, a gorilla, or a firefly, or a jellyfish. We were stuck solidly in the middle of the food chain. Picture this. Our ancestors weren't these big apex predators. We literally had to hide in the bushes and wait for a pride of lions to take down a giraffe. And we couldn't eat yet. We had to sit there terrified, waiting for the hyenas and jackals to scavenge the leftovers. Only then could early humans sneak in, grab the remaining bones, and use stone tools just to crack them open for the marrow inside. That was our entire niche. Moving on to part two, the cost of thinking, a jumbo drain. So the story finally shifts, and it's thanks to one single, staggering number, 25%. In Homo sapiens, the brain only accounts for about 2 to 3% of our total body weight, but it completely hogs 25% of the body's energy when we're just resting. To put that in perspective, the brains of other apes only require about 8%. So we essentially have this massive, energy-draining supercomputer sitting inside our skulls. Now, the crucial point here is that nature doesn't do freebies. This required a severe evolutionary trade-off. We essentially diverted energy straight from our biceps directly to our neurons. We paid for our large brains by letting our muscles atrophy. If you were to somehow put an early human in a wrestling match with a chimpanzee, the ape would rip the man apart like a rag doll. For a really long time on the African savanna, being physically weaker but having a bigger brain didn't actually seem like a winning strategy at all. But here is exactly how we solved that massive energy crisis. First step, we domesticated fire. Obviously, this gave us a dependable weapon and some warmth, but crucially, it allowed us to cook our food. Cooking killed the parasites and basically pre-digested the food for us. Because our meals were suddenly much softer and easier to process, we could afford to physically shrink our long, energy-hungry intestines. And shortening that intestinal tract freed up a massive amount of energy, which went straight to funding the growth of our jumbo brains. Section 3. Meeting Neanderthals, Clash of Species. Armed with these bigger brains and, fire, sapiens finally began to expand. As you can see here, around 70,000 years ago, they rapidly pushed out of East Africa, went into the Arabian Peninsula, and pretty quickly overran the entire Eurasian landmass. But here's the catch. Those lands were definitely not empty. Europe and the Middle East were already populated by Neanderthals. These were humans who were bulkier, heavily adapted to the cold, and get this, they actually had brains even larger than ours. So what exactly happened to them? Well, science gives us two pretty conflicting theories. On one side, we have the interbreeding theory, which suggests attraction, sex, and the gradual merging of these populations. On the other side, the replacement theory paints a much darker picture: incompatibility, absolute revulsion, and possibly the first ethnic cleansing campaign in history. Now, in this explainer, I am absolutely not here to take a side, but we do have to look at the data. Modern DNA mapping from 2010 revealed that 1 to 4% of the DNA of modern populations in the Middle East and Europe is actually Neanderthal DNA. So a little interbreeding for sure happened. But since the Neanderthals eventually vanished completely from the Earth, it's highly likely Sapiens outcompeted them, or honestly, maybe something worse. Which brings us to Section 4, Cognitive Revolution, a new way of thinking.
So, how did we manage to outcompete them? This artifact brilliantly illustrates the change. This is the Staedtl Lion Man. It's an ivory figurine found in Germany, carved about 32,000 years ago. As you can see, it has a human body and a lion's head. This is one of the very first indisputable examples of art, and likely even religion. It is literal visual proof that the sapiens' mind had fundamentally transformed. They were vividly imagining things that did not physically exist in the real world.
This entire era is what we call the cognitive revolution. It was highly likely a chance genetic mutation that completely altered the inner wiring of the sapiens' brain. Starting around 70,000 years ago, it allowed us to think in completely unprecedented ways. And most importantly, it let us communicate using an altogether new type of language. Let's look at the unique traits of this new language. First off, it's supple. We can combine sounds to communicate just endless amounts of information. Second, it's incredibly effective for gossip. I know that sounds funny, but knowing who hates whom, who's honest, and who's a total cheat allowed our ancestors to form much tighter, more sophisticated bands. But sociology tells us that gossip alone hits a wall. It can really only bond a group of up to about 150 people before things destabilize. So how do we build cities and empires? Well, that brings us to our true superpower: fiction. We are the only animals capable of talking about and collectively believing in things that do not physically exist. Section 5, The Legend of Peugeot, Shared Myths. To really see how this ancient ability still completely dictates our reality today, take a look at the modern chrome hood ornament of Peugeot, the European car maker. It looks remarkably similar to that ancient ivory lion man we just looked at, doesn't it? That is no accident. It shows a totally unbroken evolution of human myth-making, stretching over tens of thousands of years. Think about how a corporation actually exists for a second. If every single Peugeot car was completely destroyed tomorrow and every single employee quit, the company Peugeot would still legally exist. It's a legal fiction. Just as tribal shamans used hocus pocus and rituals to turn everyday objects into guardian spirits, modern corporate lawyers use their own brand of hocus pocus. They use legal paperwork, spells, and oaths written on fancy decorated paper to conjure a limited liability corporation literally out of thin air. We just all collectively nod and agree to believe it's real. And this brings us to an absolutely crucial quote from the source text. Any large-scale human cooperation is rooted in common myths that exist only in people's collective imagination. You see, you simply cannot organize millions of strangers based on gossip. It doesn't work. But you absolutely can if they all believe in the exact same imagined realities. Whether it's the myth of a corporation, the myth of human rights, the myth of a national flag, or even the myth of money itself, none of these things actually exist outside the stories we tell each other. That right there is the true secret to human domination. Which leaves us with this final, kind of provocative thought. If our entire world, our dominance, our massive institutions, are all fundamentally built on imagined realities and shared fictions, what stories are shaping your life today? Are the invisible structures you stress over every single day truly real, or are they just another shared myth? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I really hope this leaves you seeing the world just a little bit differently today.